Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show in which we explore the mystery of the human personality through the lens of, you guessed it, the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner. I'm the producer of the show. We're really happy that you've joined us. Listen, today, not only do we have one great guest, but we have two fantastic guests for you today, Lee and Laura Camp. Lee is the professor of theology and ethics at Lipscomb University right here in Nashville, Tennessee. And he also hosts the Token Show, a fantastic show which Ian compares it something to the like of Garrison Keillor meets Smart Christians. Really, really great. You got to see that if you haven't seen it. And then Lee's wife, Laura, is with us today. She is the Chief Operations Officer for Siloam Health, which is a nonprofit health organization here in Nashville, Tennessee. And they serve some of Nashville's most medically vulnerable residents. So we're so grateful for the work that they do in our city. We're grateful to have them here today. They've been married for 30 years and they get vulnerable today. It's such a wonderful show, a beautiful show. Lee talks about that constant critic that the one struggles with. He even talks about waking up the Sunday prior to when we tape this show and just communicating to Laura, I don't think I've told you just how negative this voice can be, and shares with her some of what he's going through. They talk about their early struggles, when they first got married, and now how they've come to a place, which I think is beautiful, how they are both being agents to help each other partner toward better health and moving to their best selves. So you're going to be blessed by this show today. Ian is a good friend of both Lee and Laura's, longtime friends. Lee is a 1, by the way. Laura is an 8. So lots of fireworks here. Lots of good stuff to glean from this episode. And so without any further ado, let's get on to the show. And here is the host of your show, Typology, Ian Cron.
Lee and Laura Camp, welcome to Typology.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Good to be with you again.
Oh, man. Again is right. I think this is you were with me once on the road back to you, once on Typology. I think you were one of my very first guests because you were one of my favorite guests previously. Now it's your third time. And on this run, I said, could you bring your wife? Next time I may ask you on and ask for household pets to join you. I'm not sure, but I'm delighted to have the two of you on at the same time.
Yeah, it's great to be back again. And it's great to have Laura here.
Thanks.
Good.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
All right. So before we get going, just introduce yourselves to our Typology family. Who you are, what you do, and give people some context.
Well, okay, so I'm Lee Camp. I'm a professor of theology and ethics at Lipscomb University here in Nashville. And I also host the Tokens Show, which is a Nashville-based variety show, a theological, I say it's the world's only long-running theological variety show. And it's a great deal of fun. And Ian himself has been on several times now, and it's great fun. We also have a new podcast out that just started a couple months ago, and would love if your listeners are looking for other good podcast stuff, they can come to tokenshow.com/podcasts. And we've had some similar guests. I think Bill Haslam's been on your show, I know, and we had him recently, and a lot of great folks.
Yeah. Such a great show, by the way. If you live in town and you haven't seen it, you have to go. And it's even worth making a trip to Nashville, I think. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it.
The Token Show is kind of like Garrison Keillor meets Smart Christians. Don't you think that's kind of what it is?
Yes.
And because it's so hard to, well, never mind. It's one of our favorite sort of events of the year, the Thanksgiving show. It is extraordinary. All right, so, and you're a 1 on the
Laura.
Enneagram. You're a 1 on the Enneagram.
Yes, I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, yes. Yeah, and I think my first episode with you on Typology was all about being a 1. That was a very fun interview.
It was. You were one of the most articulate ones we've ever had. Laura, what about you?
I am Chief Operations Officer at Siloam Health. We're a nonprofit healthcare organization in Nashville. We serve some of Nashville's most medically vulnerable residents. So it's my great privilege to work at Siloam. I'm also married to Lee. We've been married for 30 years this October. We've got three. Yeah, we've got 3 boys, 25, 23, and 20. And we're all home right now because of COVID in our cozy.
Right, I've done that, yes.
Cozy abode. And I'm an 8 on the Enneagram.
Wow, okay, so we got an 8-1 combination here. And I can't wait to dive into it because it's a fascinating combination. But before we get into that, Laura, what would you say if someone asked you what it would be like for them to be in your shoes for a day as an 8? Like, what would it be like for them to see the world through your eyes and experience your inner world?
Oh, that's a tough question to answer. Well, and it's hard to separate how I would describe myself from how I think others would describe me. I take very seriously the feedback I get from Lee and from others about how they experience me, and all of that gets all blurred up in my head. But I have always been told I'm forthright. I was told that, even when I was in high school, when I was graduating, that was one of the comments made to me when I made about me to all our families and friends who were at my graduation, that I'm very forthright. And I always thought, well, why isn't everybody forthright? So I do, and Lee tells me sometimes, I think that the way I see things, I presume everyone sees them the way I see them. And so it's always a surprise to me. I have to remind myself, and I am reminded, that not everyone sees things the way I see them or experiences the way I experience them. Yeah. I calls them like I sees them. And sometimes I offend people, and I don't even realize I've done it until after I've done it. Offend may be too strong a word. I think sometimes I hurt people's feelings, or they're taken aback. And I always have to recalibrate to their level of how open they are about what they see and think and feel.
Right. All right. So Lee, same question. You get someone who says, what's it like if someone were able to get into your shoes and experience your inner world and see through your eyes as a 1 on the Enneagram, what would it be like?
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I would just preface that by saying, I think that for me, I think I'm a lot healthier in my oneness than I was 5 or 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I think what's common across the unhealthy and the healthy sides of that is this sort of sense of always considering how something could be done better, and the that can be immensely helpful, and it can be unhelpful. Just depending upon how much it's dogging me or the context in which I allow that to run. But on the when I'm in an unhealthy place, I remember the first time I heard the one described. It's like, well, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's me, and well, I wouldn't do it that way. I would do it this way, and yeah, that's me, that's me. And then when it got to the way you really know you're the one, Suzanne Stabile said, is if you hear the voice. And I thought, well, doesn't everybody have the voice? So I knew I was a 1 because I have that voice, and certainly in unhealthier places, it can be this kind of condemning, critical voice. And I think even I was told Laura, I think maybe Sunday, that I had woken up with the voice, and I kind of told her what it said. And I don't think I've told you a lot about how what that's like and what I hear. But when I'm tired or stressed now, even still, it can just be very harsh, very critical, and I have to find ways to navigate that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you could point to a particular trigger. And you just mentioned being tired, being stressed, but are there other triggers? Or Laura, do you notice other triggers when that negative stream, that stream of negative self-commentary seems to be running? Like, what is it? I mean, I don't think chances are it's not random, right? There's some trigger that gets that baby going or gets you attuned to it,
Right.
Besides stress and being tired, what do you think it is?
I think it's always some. I don't know. That's a great question. I think generally it's always some form of stress, and it may not necessarily be stress that I personally am experiencing. But for example, if things are not going well with our boys, that can be a trigger because I can start thinking, what have I done wrong? How have I not been a good dad? In what ways have I failed the family? In what ways have I failed the boys? And so I think any sort of stress, whether it's necessarily directed at me or directed at people I love or directed at the social systems or institutions I'm a part of, any of that can kind of trigger a lot of that stuff. And of course, Laura and I are both in that anger triad, and our anger comes out in different ways. But
yes,
that's another sort of warning sign that I need to always try to pay attention to.
Yeah, I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. I have a little way of taking care of the inner voice. Because, I think, again, I've said this, people, I think 4s are the second number on the Enneagram to 1s who experience that stream of negative self-commentary for completely different reasons. You know what I mean? But that said, the solution to it can be the same for both. I tell people, if they can, write down what the inner critic is saying. And then, but if you can't, you could, like you're in the car or something like that, just take note of what it's accusing you of, berating you for, and then take it and sing it out loud to the tune of Happy Birthday. And I've
not heard that. I should try that.
And I am not fooling. About 75% of the sting will go away.
Huh.
Because what you'll hear yourself saying aloud, right? You'll hear yourself saying what you're telling yourself, and you'll go, this is ridiculous. And when you add Happy Birthday to it, what you're really doing is making fun of the voice. It's like you're telling the voice, I'm a rotten, I'm a rotten father, to my sons. I wish I was, I should have been tenured 15 years ago. And, blah, 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 right? And you just keep going and you're singing aloud. Do it a few times. Do a few passes at it until you find yourself laughing at your own voices.
Yeah, I'll have to try that. I do. I mean, I definitely find that journaling is a major way. As you and I talked about recently, I do I try to meditate most mornings, and but if my inner turmoil is really worked up, it's better for me just to go straight to journaling until I can get written down what's distressing me and what's bothering me.
That's good.
And then once I get it kind of written down and can look at it with some sort of objectivity, that helps me to proceed.
Well, for everyone to know this, evidence-based research proves that what you're saying is true. Mm-hmm. In psychology, that the actual use of writing, the exercise of writing things down for a host of reasons changes your whole relationship to the content of what you're writing. And I don't know how it works, but it certainly works for me. So I encourage that for everybody. All right. So I want to talk about your relationship, because if there is such a thing as opposites, 8s and 1s are it. So I just want to repeat that for everyone to hear. Think about all the couples on the Enneagram, right? If you want to find the couple that is most opposite from each other, it would be 8s and 1s. And And so there's often a lot of fireworks in this pairing. So I just want to start off by asking, how are you guys doing? Are you okay? Is everything working? What do you think of that statement?
I think I saw what you're saying most when we were first married. We would have a disagreement, and I would want Lee to argue with me, and he literally wouldn't. And then I would grow, however angry I was about whatever had triggered the disagreement, it was eclipsed immediately by my anger that he wouldn't engage me in the argument, and he wouldn't pick up the rope and argue with me. And I wanted to see him hold his own and argue with me, and he just wouldn't do it. And that probably lasted, I don't know, 4 or 5 years.
7 years.
Anyways, he got really good at it over time. And so then it felt like maybe he learned he was a 1, and he got, he learned other things about himself, and the pendulum swung to the other extreme. And we could go for 2 or 3 days arguing about something completely random and stupid. And I felt like his anger was way out of proportion with whatever had triggered the argument. But then he found his footing and learned to argue properly. And we're doing just fine now.
You mean so
That's 30 years talking.
According to Laura's rules of order. Now
I found my footing.
Now he has found his footing. So here's why I say this. Well, let's go back to this. What initially attracted you to each other?
I mean, it was classic college love. I mean, she was beautiful. She was intelligent. She was a bit exotic from my sorts of Southern Alabama church experience in certain ways because of the difference. And we just had a lot of fun together, and I think there were elements of me. I was learning. I was beginning to explore the world in different ways as a junior in college, and I think my meeting Laura and falling in love with Laura was a sort of element of exploring the largeness of the world, perhaps that was new to me at that point in my life.
Exotic. What? I want to explore that word. She was exotic.
Well, I grew up in such a sectarian Christian context that anyone outside my sectarian Christian context had a certain there was a certain taboo to it, I suppose, and so there was that element. That was not a primary driver, I don't think, but that was certainly part of the relational exploration. Was what do we do with this? Where your background is different than mine, and in the big scheme of things in American Christianity, the sociologists would look at it and say, really, y'all are not very different at all. But when you're raised in a context of where if everybody doesn't do it exactly like this, then at worst, you're afraid they're going to hell, that sort of stuff. Then when you start kind of putting your toe over that line or exploring serious relationships over that line, it does have that sort of, I guess, exotic or novelty to it that gets mixed up in all that.
Hey everybody, one of the lessons I've learned over the years is that not everybody benefits from a traditional 50-minute counseling session. And this is why some people can go to couples therapy or personal counseling for a long time and never really get anywhere. This is why I'm such a believer of intensive counseling and my friends at Restoring the Soul in Colorado, created by my longtime friend Michael Cusick to help couples or individuals experience deep change and have half-day blocks over 1 or 2 weeks. Now listen, if you can't wait months or years to get to the bottom of an issue or to experience breakthrough, you need to get in touch with my friend Michael and his extraordinary team of counselors at Restoring the Soul. If you're looking to get out of the rut you're in, but can't wait months or years, call Restoring the Soul today for a free consultation with Michael's staff. Call 303-932-9777 and learn how their intensive counseling process can help you. As a special bonus, just for Typology listeners, make sure to visit www.restoringthesoul.com/typology to download their PDF called 5 Ways Unaddressed Trauma May Be Derailing Your Relationships.
Do you think your church or your parents or family were put off, and I don't know if they were or not, by your being in relationship with an assertive woman? Like an 8 woman, that energy.
Say that again.
You guys always teased me about it from the time we met and started dating. You teased me about being a feminist.
That's right. I guess we did. I had forgotten that, but that's right.
How convenient.
Even though, I wasn't. I mean, I wouldn't have been ashamed to have been a feminist, but I wasn't even familiar with the feminist platform, and I could tell that just a strong woman at all. Well, they didn't know. Well, she must be a Jane Fonda type. Yeah. This was back in the 80s.
Yeah. There were certain elements of Southern gentility that were just presumed you don't speak out of turn, I suppose,
right.
that Laura didn't, was not interested in. And so I'm sure that would have been jarring to those. But yeah, I mean, I'd kind of forgotten about some of those dynamics. But yeah, I think that all rings very true to my recollection as well.
That's where I was trying to go with exotic a little bit. I was wondering if that was a piece of it. I was with a couple the other day, and one of the guys was just bitching about his wife. I mean, and the only word I can use is bitching. It wasn't, he was just, unhappy. And finally, I just looked at him. I said, "Hey, dude, you got the pizza you ordered, okay?" and he just sort of stopped, and though we get married at these young ages, we don't know what we're ordering. In other words, there's so much going on under the surface that we're still dramas that we're trying to resolve from childhood. Right. And we marry people really in part because we think this person's going to help me resolve this unresolved drama. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so part of that may have been, I'm going to marry a very strong woman that might piss the rest of my family off, or it might be so new that you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
It becomes part of the dance. I have no idea if that's true or not, but So Laura, what attracted you to Lee? A 1 on the Enneagram.
I did not recognize his oneness. I was attracted to him because he's confident, he's funny, he's tall, he's handsome.
Keep going.
Yeah. I loved all that about him. He was a leader on campus, and I was attracted to that. I was attracted to his intelligence. So
I like all that list.
Yeah. Usually when people do that to me, I just go, continue.
But one thing about Lee when I married him, and I don't know what dilemma I was trying to resolve or drama I was trying to resolve, but him being a 1 resonates with me when I think back, when I would describe to my friends and family what he was like. I would say, "Oh, well, he's like Moses. He's like a character, a character in the Bible. He's that perfect." And so then to realize later, all these years later, that he feels the pressure of being perfect and that he's a perfectionist, that all matches. His outward persona was he can do no wrong. And I don't think I was the only one who thought he was perfect. I know there were a lot of us who saw him that way.
See, I think initially ones are attracted to the eight's fierce, now take this correctly, to the eight's kind of fierce sexuality. So I knew you were going to take it that way, but look at you, you're about to jump out a window. I see that.
She's got to take a drink there. Yeah.
But I say that, when we talk about the deadly sin of the passion being lust, we always follow it up by saying, but we don't mean that necessarily in the sexual sense of the word. But I always say something like, we aren't necessarily saying it's not in that sense of the word, because, eights have a lot of sensual energy. There's a lot of need for contact. You know what I mean? Like there's this gusto, and sometimes it has a sensual kind of a quality to it. And the eights are turned on by sort of the self-discipline and the discipline and the good intentions of the one. And I think it sounds like, based on what you're saying, some of those dynamics were in play. I think ones are attracted to the fact that eights don't tamp down their anger. They're almost like, what? Like you're actually letting that stuff out? Like you're expressing that publicly? And it's almost like the one's going, how do I get a piece of that? Or how do I learn to do it or hide behind it or whatever? And sometimes I think the eights are impressed with the one's kind of equanimity, evenness, So that's a really a wonderful, can be a wonderful, kind of a thing in relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing I've been thinking about was a number of years ago, Laura and I have done, 3 or 4 different periods of marriage counseling. And I think the last session we were in with the woman we had done quite a fair amount of counseling with, she one day, I remember she held up her hands and she said, when I started with y'all, you were this far from each other in the way you related to things. And she said, now you're like this. So you just got to keep leaning in, And we laughed, but it was, I've kind of described it as early on in our marriage, Laura didn't have a feeling or an emotion that she didn't blurt out. And I didn't have one that I didn't ruminate on or get resentful about for 2 weeks, and then I might have said something. You know? And that's maybe a little overstated, but if it is hyperbolic, it points to a true dynamic that there was between us.
Yeah.
And so we've both had to lean a lot towards bringing what the other one does into ourselves. Right. And once, given me being more forthright, I mean, I think it was 2, I try to do a year-end, read through all my journals of the year and that sort of thing. And I think it was 2 New Year's Eves ago, my retreat, I was looking at, I'd had a lot of stuff in my journal that year about how good my relationship was with Laura. And I was looking at, what was it about that year? Could I identify something in that year that I thought had made our relationship better? And the thing I identified was that I was just being much more forthright, much more quickly. And that seemed to be something that and that's hard for me because it would always require a lot of courage for me because I think I had a lot of, would have to deal with my anxiety about Laura's emotion. And I just had to learn it's just part of relationship. And I think that for a long time, in the early years of relationships, I thought I wanted her to change that about herself. And there's certain elements of that I think is true. She didn't need to change it, but she needed to learn to express it in different ways, just like I needed to learn to express my stuff differently. So there were elements of how we both had to grow. But the point I was trying to get to is that you're saying, how can I get some of that? I don't think I ever thought about it that way. But what I've realized is for me to grow as a human being, I needed even the things about Laura that frustrated me. I needed that so I could grow as a human being. And so I think I'm a lot healthier human being because I've learned to do more of that from Laura. And then I think in turn that's helped our relationship. Do you think that that's true?
Is that the president calling? I'm just wondering.
Do you think that that's true?
Yes. I don't have anything to add. Yeah, I definitely think that that's true. You said it so well, I don't have a whole lot to add.
So, every family, you've been married 30 years, you got 3 kids. Every family undergoes seasons of crisis with children and seasons of just, almost magic kingdom, wonderful seasons. Like in terms of parenting, have you guys been through some tough times? And if so, how did the two of you as an 8 and a 1 cope with it? You know what I mean? Like how did that play out?
The way I would describe some of that is that when the kids were growing up and the house would be chaotic and there would be a lot of noise and sometimes a lot of yelling, I perceived all of that as pretty normal and it didn't bother me. Now, sure, after time that stresses anybody out, but I didn't feel like we were damaging the children for conflict to be experienced and for sharp disagreement to occur. I just thought this is all healthy and good. I think it caused Lee to, in addition to just great stress and higher blood pressure and a headache, and it caused him to feel like we're messing up by, we're doing wrong by these kids to let them be exposed to all these loud noises and all this conflict and all this negative energy. And I never felt that way. And I think he always called us back to order and civility in a way that we needed, that I needed, because my sensibility about what's appropriate and not appropriate was so skewed by my comfort level with conflict. But then I think for him, I think I've been helpful in that sometimes when one of our kids is having a crisis, sometimes it seems real clear to me, well, here's what's going on, and here's what we're going to do about it. Get in the car. Right. And sometimes those kinds of crises, I can see it on Lee's face. It shuts him down temporarily. And so on those kinds of occasions, my 8-ness comes in handy. So I think we've tag teamed pretty, pretty effectively.
No, I would very much agree with that kind of description of the dynamic. I think is very much the way I've experienced it as well. And I did, anxiety has been, I got treated for an ulcer when I was like in 7th grade. And so I was like wired with anxiety from a very young age, or born that way, or however all that works. And so the stresses of just having 3 boys who still are very active, caused me a great deal of anxiety through the years. And I didn't always handle it really well. But yeah, that sort of, sometimes when we need that, we were just having a pretty pointed conversation with the boys in the last week or two. And I remember thinking, was sitting at the dining room table looking at Laura, and Laura was in her healthy 8 mode, and thinking, I'm glad that she's in this space right now, because right. It's when we're, and that's the beautiful thing about it is I remember one time reading some stuff about 8s and 1s and the challenges, the serious challenges that there are between 8 and 1 being married to each other. But then it talked about, but if both of those can get into a healthy space, in their relationship, then there's all sorts of really great, powerful stuff that can come out of that.
Oh,
And I think especially in the last 5 years, we're beginning to get into that space, and I think that it's pretty great.
Hey, Anthony,
Yeah,
you know I've been working on my latest book, right?
I do.
Well, part of my process is researching topics related to my content.
Okay.
But as you can imagine, there are tons of resources out there. So let me tell you about one of my ultimate life hacks.
Please tell us.
It's called Blinkist. If you haven't heard of it, Blinkist takes the best need-to-know information from thousands of nonfiction books and condenses them down into just 15 minutes that you can read or listen to. I like Blinkist because it quickly gives me the main points of a book, which helps me evaluate which books I want to make time to read in full later and which ones to prioritize now for the projects I'm working on. And since Blinkist works on my phone, my tablet, or in a web browser, I use it anywhere, whether I'm traveling, making breakfast, working out, you name it. I've listened to and highly recommend Daniel Nettles' book Personality and Michelle Obama's book Becoming. I love both of them. You can even read or listen to the key takeaways from The Road Back to You by yours truly.
I like that.
With Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books. All the books you want and all for one low price. Now check this out. Right now, for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer just for our typology audience. Go to Blinkist.com/typology, try it free for 7 days, and save 25% off your new subscription. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/typology, that's TYPOLOGY, to start your free 7-day trial. And you'll also save 25% off, but only when you sign up at Blinkist.com/typology.
how has the Enneagram helped you get into that last 5 years of being in a better space? What role has it played, if any?
I think for me, it helped me identify language for the way I experience reality, and then it helped me identify some basic ways to lean into the healthy aspects of that. And then it taught me, Suzanne Stabile, and I don't even know if I've ever told Laura this, and I've laughed about it with some of my friends that I've told, but in that session with Suzanne Stabile, she said, she did the 8s and then the 9s and then the 1s, and then she got to the end of the 1s, and she said, now if you're a 1 who's married to an 8, there are special challenges there, and this is the way you should argue with an 8. And I was like, give me this, And have I ever told you this? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was a sort of you let the 8 say what they say, and then you repeat it quite forcefully to make it clear that you understand what they're saying. Mm. And then you forcefully state what you think and shut up. And then Suzanne laughed and she said, and if they don't say anything, then you've won the argument.
That's right. That's right. And the key is never rub their nose in the loss.
Yeah.
Because if you do, it will start all over again from scratch. Right?
Yeah, and I'll win that next round.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I now know the moves. So yeah, I think that what makes 8s and 1s together so interesting is, one is you are both anger types, right? That's number one. Number 2, you're both black and white thinkers by nature. I'm not saying you haven't grown up and learned about gray, but chances are when you're not being very self-aware, black and white is where you go, right?
Right.
Right. The other thing is as the relationship matures, anger surfaces, 8s want direct expression, and then 1s will retaliate with force if the 8 goads them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it sounds like y'all have sort of moved past that moment in your life, as though that was in your earlier years.
Yeah.
I mean, finally, we had some very painful years.
Yeah. Yeah, we had quite a few very painful years, I would say. And it was not a quick... we're both pretty smart, but we didn't... we couldn't or wouldn't adapt in ways we needed to adapt for a long time.
Right. And part is that anger triad. Well, the one is thinking, I know I'm right. Why should I adapt? I'm only going to be adapting to something that's wrong. You know what I mean? If I leave my space.
Yeah.
And, the 8 is a black and white thinker for different reasons, is thinking, why should I adapt? You know what I mean? So, but you have touched on something that's probably worth asking about. You just said that you went through a good number, I think that was the word you said, of painful years. And I'm just curious if you'd be willing to share that with folks who are listening, who may be 8s and 1s, like what, or who just need to know, like what was that journey about?
They were very painful. I think that for a number of years, and we were learning about the Enneagram kind of during these painful years. And you had asked earlier, how has the Enneagram helped us in our marriage? The Enneagram did validate some of our suspicions about ourselves and about the other person. That was very helpful. Lee, and just to digress, Lee would always tell me that he had a negative, he never used the words, I have a negative voice, before we knew about the Enneagram, but he would say, I believe all these terrible things about myself. My brain tells me I'm no good, I'm not a good writer, I'm not a good teacher, I'm not, whatever. And I reacted in two ways. One, I thought, I can't relate to that at all. My brain tells me I am fantastic all the time. Why would your brain tell you all those terrible things about yourself? But two, I thought, that makes me mad because you're way more accomplished than I am. And if you think ill of yourself when you've been, you've received all these accolades throughout your life for all these wide variety of things, that's kind of annoying. How needy are you? If that's not enough for you, how needy are you? So all of that to say, the Enneagram helped me understand Lee, and it helped me understand me better. And I couldn't understand before the Enneagram why anger was always there for me. And Lee would say, there's an undercurrent of anger with you. And he said that during those hard years, before we knew the Enneagram. And at first I denied it, and I said, no, there's no undercurrent of anger. What are you talking about?
I was like, damn it, there's no undercurrent of anger here.
But then when I realized I was an 8, I thought, oh, there is an undercurrent of anger, and that doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. So that was all very validating. That's how the Enneagram has been most helpful to me. But in terms of the hard years, I think part of it is having been married. The hard years probably started 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit before. So by that point, we'd been married 17, 18 years when things started getting really hard. There was a lot of self-pity, I think, on both sides. Their life is expecting a lot of you when you hit that 20-year mark. Your kids need you. Your parents start to get sick and need things. There are a lot of demands on us. The kids cost more and more money the older they get. So there are a lot of demands on us. And I feel like we were both just feeling sorry for ourselves and looking for the other to kind of soothe and take care of us, and neither of us had the energy to take care of ourselves, much less
The other. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that description is true to my experience as well. And the what's popping in my mind, kind of two things. One is that to say something Laura already said, but to say it in more general terms, just in the way she said that learning about being an 8 gave her a sense of validation. Learning about the Enneagram generally, that there are nine basic types, made me realize, or helped me realize in abstract terms, we all just experience the world differently, and we're all very different people. And it doesn't do me any good, and it doesn't do whoever I'm relating to, whether it's Laura or somebody, one of my kids or a friend or whatever. It doesn't do me any good to ascribe a personal offense to the way they're reacting or responding, if that may have a whole lot more to do with it. That's just the way they experience the world, and that's their kind of basic inbred way of experiencing with their reality. And so it gave me, as a 1 who thinks there's a right way to do things, it gave me a lot more space to be less personally hurt by other people's default way of being in the world. And so that was immensely helpful. And then 2, I think I had to start taking more ownership. I'm a fan of this guy Edwin Friedman, who's a psychotherapist, Jewish. I think he was a Jewish rabbi, wasn't he? But he's got this book called Failure of Nerve, and he talks about how the failure that happens in families and the failure that happens in social systems is our failure to exhibit some nerve, and to have enough courage and have enough backbone to not let ourselves be dominated by our anxiety, and to show up and say the things that need to be said and do the things that need to be done, and take ownership for how I need to be in a given situation, even if I feel all stressed out, And so that was very helpful. And then the third thing that just occurred to me, I think is very helpful that I'll throw out there. I also have learned a lot from David Schnarch, Schnarch, who's written books called Passionate Marriage.
Yeah.
And
there's a copy of it right there.
Yeah. And another one that has intimacy in the title. I forget the title of it, but he's big on saying that what some people call a problem marriage is not a problem marriage; it is a marriage, and that the tensions and the heat comes naturally from what happens when two people commit their lives together, and that those what he calls those crucible moments, you can either allow the heat and the fire of that to help you grow and mature into a human being you could not become otherwise, or you can get out of it and not grow up and go find somebody else who's at your level of emotional maturity, and then you have to go through the same process again. And so that whole basic construct was terribly helpful to me, because it's like, okay, I want to accept that we're at this kind of impasse. And it was for several years, and I meanwhile fell into a deep depression, and one of our kids in particular was doing very poorly, and we were concerned for him, and so I had to figure out, what am I supposed to learn out of this? And I'll say that I just want to qualify what I'm about to say by saying I'm not giving any sort of medical advice. But you and I remember one time Ian had a conversation about this over dinner one night in Franklin, talking about taking antidepressants, And I took an antidepressant for a while, and then I stopped because I felt like the side effects were worse than the disease itself. But then we went through quite a period of time where Laura did want me to continue to take an antidepressant, and I did not want to take an antidepressant. Not because I was theologically or medically opposed to it, because I think if somebody needs that, they should take it. And I was open to deciding that that's what I needed to do. But what I did not want to do was to preempt the process of letting the pain I was in teach me whatever it was I needed to learn.
Right.
And in time, I think looking back on it, even though it was awful, I mean, I was pretty seriously depressed for 2.5 years. And I think looking back on it, I'm glad I handled it the way I did, because I finally was able to figure out some things I needed to figure out, motivated by that pain. And so I think I'm a healthier human being today now because we stuck together. And now I look at kind of where we are, and I think, it's so wonderful, and I'm deeply grateful for where we are in our relationship. And but it has not been easy getting to where we are.
So, it's interesting. I appreciate what you're saying. As a therapist, I think, particularly GPs, let's say, but even some psychiatrists are quick to prescribe, right, when people present. Now, if you go to a Jungian, they're not going to be quick to prescribe. And the reason is the pain, they would say, is your soul summoning you to a new and higher expression of yourself. And so they're going to wait as long as they possibly can, if not for the whole of your time and treatment with them, not allowing you to get out of the pain. Because the pain, it's like when what was his name? Donahue, the Catholic priest, wonderful writer, John O'Donohue. John O'Donohue, he would say, like, when pain came into his life, he would ask, "Brother Pain, what brings you to my life at this point? Why now? Why now?" And I thought that's a beautiful way of sort of articulating what you're saying. If you really need it, sometimes we would prescribe because someone was in so much pain that all we were talking about was the symptoms of the depression. And we couldn't get to the underlying stuff until we could get a floor underneath them where they weren't just talking about, I can't sleep, I'm having panic attacks, I hate myself. It's like, okay, well, let's get that calmed down, and then we can talk about why. But if you can endure the pain without chemical assistance so that you can really do the work, that's the best way to go, So, all right, so we got to get close to wrapping up here, but I want to say something about 8s and 1s that I think is pretty fascinating. And this, by the way, so there are 3 cardinal numbers on the Enneagram, 3, 6, and 9. And you've got 3 types, and then you've got 2 expressions of that type in a way. One that overexpresses and one that underexpresses, right? The features of that cardinal type, right? And I think what's interesting with 8s and 1s is that you are both the wing numbers of 9, right? And that actually is really important because 8s, and this goes for those other numbers. In a way, the 9 emerges or comes into being in order to reconcile and integrate the 8 and the 1 inside of themselves. Because that 9 doesn't want conflict, right? It wants to tamp down anger. And so there's that one dimension to the 9, right? On the other hand, the 8 would love to explode. I mean, the 9 would love to explode and just let it out. I'm tired of being a peacemaker, right? On the other hand, needs to tamp it down. So it actually emerges because of the energy of the 8 and the 1. I mean, 8 plus 1 is 9. I don't know what the heck that means. But, really, in this situation, 8 plus 1 really is 9 in a way, but 2 dimensions. But it's the 9 trying to reconcile the tension between the 8 and the 1 inside themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what happens is 8s wake up from the sleepy influence of the 9 by going against other people. 1s do it by knowing the right thing to do. And which means that both are reactive versus proactive. And so when it comes, for example, to times when you have to make a big personal decision, eights and ones can tend to polarize and won't budge, and that's a facet of it too. All right, so I'm going to close with a question. I just, by the way, have been studying that dimension of the Enneagram, and so when I saw I had an 8 and 1 on today, I was like, oh, good. I'm going to talk about how that dynamic works. That in a way, for sixes, they're trying to navigate their coming into being as a result of the tension between 5 and 7. And, threes are navigating between 4 and 2, this tension inside themselves. It's pretty fascinating, right?
Yeah.
So
Can I ask a question before you close, or could I come in with a question after?
no, come in now and then I'm going to close.
Okay. Because you kind of hinted at some of this stuff, but I thought I think this is kind of an interesting question for the two of you. Now that you understand the unconscious motivation, right? It's like when you and you both alluded to that. When you don't know that, I think it's harder to recognize the gift that you're being given. And so I would just like to ask the both of you, now that you know the unconscious motivation, like for instance, Laura with Lee, that he's not just being hard on himself, but it's coming from a deeper place. What's the thing, using Enneagram language, what's the thing that you most appreciate about the other? Because now that you know the unconscious motivation, it builds empathy. And now that you have that empathy where you haven't had it maybe in the past, you've expressed that. What is the one thing using Enneagram language that you can really appreciate about the other? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think for me, it's seeing Laura's passion for life and passion for laughter, and just the way she's immensely productive and proactive and gets in the middle of things in our household and our family, and looking for constructive ways to tend with the messes or to do something about the messes, and that comes through in her laughter, and it comes through in the ways that she just jumps into things, and I find it very beautiful about her.
I love that. Laura?
I think for me, one of the things I admire most about Lee that grows out of his oneness is his discipline. So he's very disciplined, not only with his work, but just with his life. There's a lot of intentionality and purposefulness you heard him earlier in the hour reference that he reads back through his journal from the year to see what he can learn about himself and what emerges. And I have learned a lot about purposefulness and discipline from Lee. And so he has inspired me to adopt a greater sense of purpose and purposefulness about just my own cognitive well-being. I'm just a more thoughtful, meditative, present person.
So this is kind of a related question, but different enough that I want to ask it because I love asking this question of every couple. So Laura, what do you know and believe about Lee that you wish Lee knew and believed about himself, but he doesn't?
I think, I could pick, I guess, a couple of different things. But one thing I know and believe about Lee is, I don't want to embarrass him, but he's physically attractive.
Okay. And you laughed when I said that eights are attracted to the sexuality. And everybody laughed at me when I said that. But
yeah. But I have watched Lee struggle with his sense of whether he is attractive. And I see that in him, and I wish I would like for him to see that about himself.
That's beautiful.
What about you, Lee? What do you know and believe about Laura that you wish Laura knew and believed about herself, but she doesn't?
Before I go to that, just to give you a glimpse into my oneness, Laura knows me well enough to know that when I'm in anxiety, one of my tells, this is not always true because she sometimes, as a good 8, she always will overinterpret this sometimes. But she has rightfully identified that when I am in anxiety, I scratch my head, yeah. And when she was doing that just a second ago, I caught myself scratching my head and thinking, well, the only reason anybody would worry about their physical attractiveness is if they're vain, So it's that classic oneness of that. That's what I do with that. But I receive that, and thank you. I appreciate that.
Does anyone else hear Kenny G playing right now? I swear I heard the sax somewhere.
I'm just telling you, this question inevitably ends well for everybody, okay? What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to find the right words for it. I know what I want to say, but I'm trying to find the right words for it. I find that there's certain elements of Laura's 8-ness in which she can be really hard on herself about all that stuff. And one of the things that's been so beautiful about us staying together now for almost 30 years is that I have watched the ways in which she's worked really hard at trying to find the ways to let those characteristics in her be moderated when they need to be moderated. And I can still watch her be, I think, overly hard on herself. And I don't know that I don't think she realizes how much I admire all that in her and all of those traits that she has, because she's done, especially in this most recent, in her working career after she's gone back to work outside the home, it's been incredible from my perspective, the kind of work that she's done. And she's only been given more and more opportunities to do that in the last number of years. And I think it's amazing of what she's able to accomplish and do, and the way her 8-ness is proactive about honoring people that need to be honored, in helping bring people together and to be very mindful of people, especially anybody on the margins of a community or a group. Just all of that expressions of her 8-ness are very beautiful and very poignant and profound, I think. And I don't think she always sees the ways her 8-ness is so productive and beautiful in that way.
Wow, great. Well, listen, you guys, thank you so much for bringing your beautiful 8-ness and oneness onto the show. And Lee, Laura, I don't know you as well, but Lee, you know that I love you like nobody's business. I love Tokens. I love the Tokens podcast, which I hope everyone will subscribe to. I love the Tokens show wherever is performing, particularly at the Ryman at Thanksgiving. And I have a deep place of affection in my heart for you. Typology listeners, please don't forget the words of the great Oscar Wilde. Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken. Until next time.
Thank you, Ian. Love you.
Thank you.